In the seaside village of Gansbaai, South Africa, the locals have a word when the sea is rough, sporting huge waves. In Afrikaans they call it sterk water. Directly translated, it means strong water. These waves can sometimes get quite enormous, and this is where the South African invention of the dolosse really shows its worth, protecting the harbour piers being destroyed by the force of the waves. These 80-ton interlocking concrete blocks are amazingly effective to absorb the enormous amounts of energy contained in ocean waves. Talking about the locals, these guys don't have any fear for this abundance of energy. A bizarre local sport is to actually go sit out the waves crashing over the harbour wall during a storm. In June 2020, Janine Taylor videoed these three doing their madness. She noticed they had a GoPro and later asked if we could get some footage. The huge waves were further accelerated by gale force winds. In January 2022, Johan Leroux also managed to film three lunatics doing their craziness. This time there was no wind, making it easier to photograph their strategy of jumping up to see when the next wave arrives and then hiding behind the wall. They survive this because they know when and where to hide and by huddling together. There are a number of photographers like Rian Jacobs, Johan Leroux and even myself who are perpetually taking pictures around Gansbaai. It is therefore inevitable that we are bound to catch something unique on film. Like in August 2013, when Rian caught the St. Croix floating freely after breaking its mooring during strong weather, only to run aground shortly afterwards. Attempts to refloat it afterwards were unsuccessful, and it has since been cut up for scrap metal. Exactly a year before that, also during rough seas, we heard that the wreckage of the Libra washed out ashore between the old and the new Gansbaai harbours. When looking through my pictures of the previous day, I realized I actually took the last ever picture of it. In January 2022, the seagod Poseidon was again angry, resulting in another terrible drama in Gansbaai. A car with two people in it got washed off the harbour pier. This time Johan also found a before picture of the fateful car amongst his pictures. The owner of the A-class Mercedes, Calvin Combrink, and his cousin Xavier Belcher, both crew members of the longliner I Do, were busy working on the ship when their fellow crewmen alerted them about the growing storm. It was decided to remove all vehicles from the pier. The bakkies, the South African name for a pickup, all made it out safely, but by the time Calvin and Xavier started negotiating the dreadful trip, huge waves were already crashing over the pier. They tried to time their dash to safety during the lulls between waves as much as possible before gunning for it. Just over halfway to safety, a huge wave surprised them and swept the car into the harbour, unfortunately first bouncing it over the dolosse. Calvin described the experience as being hit side-on by a truck at full speed. Xavier got quite a bashing, leaving him injured and disorientated, while Calvin's safety training kicked in. While the car was sinking, he managed to free both of them through the smashed windscreen. They managed to swim to safety to a nearby boat, from where they called for help. Xavier's nose was badly split and was bleeding profusely. They also suffered injuries to their hands and bodies. After being spotted and rescued by a rowboat, they were taken to hospital by ambulance, where Xavier had to get stitches to his nose. By the next day, the storm subsided enough to start the recovery of the car from the water. Local divers soon established that it got badly damaged in its tumble from the pier. With the help of a 200-litre drum and by stuffing 16 plastic cans inside the car, they got enough buoyancy to pull it towards the pier with a bakkie. To eventually get it up the pier, a forklift, 2 vehicles, lots of rope, and even more ingenuity was required. The operation took a few hours, during which crowd gathered and later lost interest. There were tense moments when the rope broke and people gasped, expecting the car to fall back in the sea. At some point the forklift almost capsized, being pulled sideways by the water. It was a great relief when the car was eventually pulled over the edge. While on its side, the damage to the suspension was very obvious. After unceremoniously putting the car back on its wheels, it was driven off by the forklift to a nearby enclosure. In living memory, locals recall 3 more incidents of vehicles falling into Gansbaai harbour before, meaning it is bound to happen again in future.